So college prospects, what is it? Has it always been? And is it 5 visits, 5
Yes.
official visits?
Five
It's unofficial,
officials.
but there's 5 visits, right?
Yes, 5 officials.
Well, the NCAA Division I Council on Thursday came up with that now athletes, high school athletes, will be able to take an unlimited number of official visits as part of the recruiting process starting on July 1. These are the new rules. Recruits will be able to will be limited to 1 official visit per school now, unless there's a coaching change. So you can go to Texas, or you can go to Oklahoma, or you can go to Tech, or you can go to Baylor or TCU or whoever, Alabama, Ohio State, but you can't go twice on an official visit unless there's a coaching change at one of those schools.
Yeah, there's some other thing, like the coaches, there's less of a window, so they can maybe have more of a life, and they're not always recruiting. Plus, that's changed. The schools can still only have 56
official visits.
So it's not like, the recruits can go infinitely, and so can the schools. So I think it probably makes sense for 2023 and beyond recruiting, because there are going to be some guys who are going to try to take 25 official visits. Walter Nolan, last year's number 1 overall prospect that signed with A&M, could have taken 700 visits if he wanted to. He could have gone to every single school.
Even those in China and Russia.
Yeah, wherever he wanted to go. If he called him up and said, I'm taking an official visit, they would have used one of their 56. But for the most part, I would say this means that kids can probably take 10. Well, at the higher level, the more in-demand guys will take 10 or 12, and most of them might just take 7 or 8.
I mean, we were just conditioned to think that 5 is what's supposed to be.
Yeah,
if it had started off as 8, then we'd be going, well, why they moving to 9? This is ridiculous. 8 was perfect, right? That's what we would do, right? So, I know initially it's like, well, 5's not enough. Like, you can't decide from 5 visits. That's crazy. But, I mean, a Walter Nolan, like you said, or, these top prospects that really do have all of these top schools that are coming after them, maybe that does allow them some freedom where they don't have to narrow it down, the top 5-ish as early as they do, or they don't have to limit it to just 5 official visits. They can go to that 6th, 7th, 8th. And I think it's, a nice move forward into modernizing the recruiting rules. I know initially there's probably going to be some, blowback of like kids these days, like where do you draw the line? And I'm sure I've seen some of that, on social media, just people initially reacting to a headline. But yeah, once you dive further into it, I mean, the schools aren't going to automatically be on the hook for all this extra money for these extra visits. They can say no, for one.
Absolutely.
And 2, they are still locked into a number. So long as, you don't rip away the 56 visits or whatever you can host, then I think that's okay. But if you were to rip that away to where if Ohio State wants to, they can host 100 official visits and they want us to pay for all that, whereas a Baylor can maybe only host 60, maxing it out, well, they just chalk that up as another benefit for being a bigger, larger, richer school. But right now, that's not necessarily the case. There are still some, breaks along the way, or break tapping along the way as far as, like I said, the official visit number stays for the school. You can't visit twice unless there's a coaching change. So there are some, things that are keeping it within a certain parameter. But, yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see who uses that and how. I mean, who's the first guy to go on 15 official visits? And I'm sure there will be at least 1 or 2 or however many people that will end up doing that. How many of these schools just freely open the doors to guys that are, considering 12 other schools that they've been on official visits on? So with that number still in place for schools, I think it'll be interesting to see how they're calculated with it for those who may be able to welcome more into their doors. Since there is a cap on it, it's not just a free-for-all. So, I'm very curious of how that kind of works for both the schools and for the players as well.
Well, it is changing. So you have a lot. Here's what happened. It's like when Berlin, eventually the wall came down, right? And there's this free flow. And in college athletics, there was a wall. Is that fair to say? Mm-hmm. The NCAA was one of the most feared entities or businesses or groups in America, other than perhaps maybe the IRS. And they would not budge. They were not going to give athletes much. That doesn't mean that there weren't things that were getting better. And now they pretty much have almost everything. They have almost open free agency. They have ability to get paid. They will now have more visits to take because who knows? Maybe somebody knows without even taking a visit, they're going to go to Florida State or Oklahoma or somewhere else. But for some, let's say you get through 3 or 4, and then all of a sudden some other schools that were perhaps not interested in you or you weren't interested in them, and then you watch them play a few times, and you want to go, and you're locked out because you've already taken 5 visits. So there's something to that to be said, too.
Yeah, I mean, if you're team number 6 on the official visit list, well, guess what? Now you're going to get an official visit as long as you haven't, overran your allotted number of visits, which if there's a guy who, you really want and he's putting you at, like, visit 6 or beyond, I mean, if that's who you really want, then, yeah, you have the freedom to make it happen, whereas before you just hope that you made a solid enough impression and a better impression through phone and email and, an unofficial visit versus the trip to Gainesville or Austin or, Madison or wherever where they got the full meal deal. So I can see where it's going to be certainly a benefit for the bigger schools, but I think this is like kind of sweeping. I think it could benefit everybody just in different ways. In the smaller schools that, I saw one kind of narrative that I saw building in a couple of different articles was like the local factor, which is going back to like if you're visit number 6 or 7, but you don't get it. Well, now maybe a guy does take a visit closer to home because he's got the freedom and doesn't have to limit it to, well, I've only got 5. I better go 5 places where it's a plane trip, to fully take advantage of it. Now, maybe with visit number 6, you stay in Dallas and go to visit TCU or SMU or wherever. So that could work out both ways pretty well. We'll see, though. It's like anything else, on the surface. There's always a way to go to the extreme in college sports. So I'm trying to imagine who's already cooking up how they can do that.
Well, Kirby Smart is.
Yeah, probably.
Like he's already figuring out how he can maximize his 56. He already does. But I do think an interesting thing about this was, like you mentioned, the Twitter panic, because kids will release a graphic of these are my top 16 schools. Well, now he could go visit all 16 of those schools, but when it comes time to start making those visit arrangements officially, there are kids that are 4-star and 3-star guys that get 16 offers, but when they start, trying to make those visits, that'll get whittled down to maybe 10 too, because some of them will have already gotten somebody at that position. Maybe they weren't the chief one, or there's overlap there. They can't schedule it. So, yeah, I think everybody freaking out because the kids that put out the top 16 graphics are like, I'm going all 16 of these places. I just doubt that stuff's ever really going to happen. The logistics of it alone is really hard to work out.
Yeah, I mean, you still have to play a season. You still have to take care of some other things. I mean, 16 weekend official visits, that's going to take up a lot of time. So, yeah, I mean, I'm sure somebody will abuse it, but I don't think that it's necessarily another dagger in the coffin of the NCAA and college football structure. I just think that, yeah, both sides are going to benefit in different ways, and big schools might benefit a little bit more, but there is some benefit to the smaller schools as well. So it'll be fascinating to see what that turns into.
Tomorrow, the transfer portal.